I never told anyone about the breathing at first, not because I was scared they wouldn't believe me, but because I almost didn't believe myself. It started after I moved into the apartment. Old building, late 70s maybe, concrete walls, bad insulation. The kind of place where sound travels in strange ways. You hear things you're not supposed to hear, and sometimes you don't hear things you definitely should. I expected noise. I was ready for noise. I'd lived in dorms, cheap rentals, places with paper-thin walls. What I wasn't ready for was how intentional it sounded. The first night it happened, I woke up sometime after 3. I didn't check the clock right away. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, that familiar foggy state where you're not fully awake yet, where your thoughts drift and your body feels slightly wrong. At first I thought it was my own breathing, amplified by the quiet, echoing back at me from the walls. That happens sometimes when you wake up suddenly. You become aware of things you usually ignore. Your heartbeat, your breath, the pressure of your own weight against the mattress. I held my breath for a second just to test it, just to prove to myself it was coming from me. The sound didn't stop. It kept going, steady, patient. Inhale. Exhale. Slow enough that I could count it without trying. 5 seconds in. 7 seconds out. Too slow for pipes. Too irregular for any kind of ventilation. And there was something about the texture of it that bothered me. It wasn't muffled the way sound usually is through walls. It wasn't sharp either. It was thick. What? Like air being pulled through something soft. I turned my head toward the wall on my left. That was the wall I shared with the neighboring apartment. I didn't know who lived there. I'd seen the door across the hall, always closed, no decorations, no welcome mat. I told myself it was an older man, someone with bad lungs, maybe sleeping close to the wall. I told myself a lot of things in those first few minutes, anything to avoid the thought that it didn't sound like someone sleeping. People don't breathe like that when they sleep. There's usually variation. A cough, a sigh, a shift in position. This was controlled, deliberate, like whoever it was awake and paying attention to every breath they took. I stayed completely still, afraid that if I moved even slightly, the sound would change, that it would react. At some point my chest started to ache and I realized I had been unconsciously matching my breathing to it, syncing myself to that slow rhythm through the wall. When I noticed, I forced myself to breathe faster, shallow, just to break the connection. The sound didn't follow. It stayed exactly the same, like it hadn't noticed me at all. Eventually, exhaustion won. I don't remember falling asleep, just the sound fading into the background, becoming part of the room the way distant traffic or a refrigerator hum does. The next morning, I convinced myself it was nothing. Old buildings make noises. Your brain fills in gaps when you're half asleep. I went to work, had coffee, thought about other things. I didn't even think about the wall until the next night. It happened again almost at the same time. I checked the clock this time. 3:12 a.m. The breathing was already there when I woke up, like it had been going on long before I became aware of it. Same rhythm. Same depth. Same unsettling closeness. I pressed my ear lightly against the wall, expecting the sound to get louder. It didn't. It stayed exactly the same, as if the wall itself was breathing. I knocked, very softly at first, just a single tap with my knuckle. The sound stopped instantly. Not faded. Not slowed. Just gone. The silence that followed felt wrong, heavier than the noise had been. I waited, heart pounding, listening for movement on the other side. Footsteps. A voice. Anything. There was nothing. After a full minute, I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. The breathing didn't come back that night. Or the next. For almost a week, everything was normal. I started to think I had imagined the whole thing. I started to feel embarrassed about how scared I'd been, how easily my mind had jumped to conclusions. Then, on the 7th night, I woke up to the sound again. Same wall. Same rhythm. But this time it was closer, not louder, just closer, like whatever was making the sound had moved nearer to the wall. Like it was right there on the other side, breathing into it. I lay there, staring at the dark, suddenly very aware of how thin that wall actually was, and how little it separated me from whatever was awake at the same time I was. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, pretending I was reading, pretending I was too tired to care. But I could still hear it. The breathing. Slow. Methodical. Just beyond the wall, just out of reach. I thought about leaving, moving out, calling the landlord, calling the police, but something kept me there. Curiosity, maybe. Or stupidity. I don't know which. I finally rolled over, almost daring it, and pressed my ear against the wall. It didn't stop. It was right there. So close that I could feel the vibration of each inhale, a wetness in the air, a weight pressing into my ribs. I told myself to breathe normally, to act normal, but my body was frozen, paralyzed by the certainty that this was no ordinary neighbor. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning. And then the breathing changed. Not faster, not louder, just deeper. The kind of deep that fills a room without moving air, that sits in your chest, that makes you question if you're the one exhaling now or if it's coming from somewhere else entirely. I reached for my phone, shaking, intending to record it, to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. But when I touched the screen, the sound stopped. Instantly. My hand hovered over the phone, heart hammering. I waited. Nothing. For a moment I thought it was gone, that it had left, that maybe it had never existed. And then I felt it, a soft tap on my bedroom wall. Not loud. Just a single tap, almost like a heartbeat. Then another and another, slowly building into a rhythm. My blood ran cold. I could hear it matching my own heartbeat now. Tap, 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 sink, sink. I scrambled out of bed, stomach twisting, and pressed my ear to the wall again. The breathing had returned, faster now, not natural, not human. I wanted to run, to scream, to leave, but my body refused. I could feel it through the wall, as if it were pressing against me, testing me, learning me. And then I realized it wasn't coming from the other side. It had always been here. Inside the walls, yes, but inside too. In the air, in the floors, in the floorboards beneath me. It had been waiting, watching, learning when I slept, when I breathed, when I moved. And now it knew. I bolted for the door, but the apartment felt different, thicker, darker. The shadows seemed heavier, alive. Every step echoed, every sound I made answered by a faint, wet inhale that didn't match me. I ran out into the hallway, lights flickering, trying to find my way to the stairs, but the building felt bigger than it should. Corridors I'd never seen stretched endlessly, doors that weren't there before lining the walls. And then I understood. It had been patient for years, maybe decades. It knew the building better than anyone, knew where the walls were weakest, where the floors might give, where I would panic first. I never saw anyone on the stairs. Never saw anyone in the hallways. But I could hear the breathing now all around me, coming from corners, from above, below, from inside my own body. And I realized I wasn't running away. I was running into it. I don't know how long I ran. Hours maybe. Days maybe. Time lost all meaning. Eventually, I found myself back in my apartment, lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, pretending I was reading, pretending I was too tired to care. And there it was. The first inhale. The first exhale. Slow. What? Careful. Waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to join it. I've tried moving. Tried different apartments, different cities. It doesn't matter. I hear it in hotel walls, in trains, in the quiet moments before dawn. Sometimes I wonder if it was ever the wall at all, or if it's been inside me from the start, following me, learning me, and waiting for the moment I'd finally listen. Now every night I lie awake and count. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Matching it. Because if I don't, it notices. And I'm never alone. The first thing that changed wasn't the sound. It was the silence. I had lived in the apartment for almost 3 months before I noticed it. A small place, newly renovated, nothing special. Concrete walls, white paint, cheap laminate floors. The kind of apartment you rent because it's practical, not because it feels like home. I worked late, came back tired, ate, slept. Routine. Quiet. Predictable. At some point, I realized I no longer heard my neighbors. At first, that felt like a blessing. No TV through the walls, no footsteps, no arguments, no random noises at night. Just quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but I didn't think much of it. New buildings are like that sometimes. Better insulation. Better planning. Then one evening, while washing dishes, I noticed I could hear myself breathing. Not in a poetic way. Not in a mindfulness way. In a very literal, physical way. My breath sounded louder than it should have, like the kitchen was amplifying it. I stopped moving. Held my breath. The sound faded. I exhaled again. It came back. I remember thinking the acoustics were strange. That the walls felt closer than they had before. That night I woke up without knowing why. No nightmare. No noise. Just awake. My eyes opened and I lay there, staring into the dark, listening. That's when I noticed it, a faint, steady sound coming from the wall behind my bed. Breathing. At first I assumed it was mine. When you wake up suddenly, your senses lie to you. You misplace sounds. Your body feels unfamiliar. I lay still, focusing on my own lungs. Inhale. Exhale. The sound didn't match. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was controlled, careful, almost polite, like someone trying very hard not to be noticed. Each inhale took a little longer than mine. Each exhale lingered, soft and warm as if pressed through fabric. I turned onto my side facing the wall. The sound didn't change. I told myself it was a neighbor, someone sleeping close to the wall. Maybe an older person. Maybe someone sick. Thin walls can do strange things to sound. I had heard worse in other apartments. I closed my eyes and waited for it to stop. It didn't. After a while, my chest started to feel tight. I realized I had unconsciously begun to match my breathing to it, syncing myself to that slow rhythm. When I noticed, I forced myself to breathe faster, unevenly, just to break the pattern. The sound stayed the same. Eventually, I fell asleep. In the morning, I felt stupid, embarrassed even. I replayed the night in my head and it already felt unreal, distorted by half-sleep and imagination. Old buildings make noise. Bodies do strange things when they're tired. I went to work and forgot about it, until it happened again. Same time. Just after 3. Same wall. Same breathing. This time I checked the clock. 3:08 a.m. I sat up slowly, careful not to make the bed creak. The sound continued, unbothered. I leaned closer to the wall, pressing my ear against the cold surface. I expected it to get louder. It didn't. It stayed exactly the same, as if the sound wasn't traveling through the wall at all, as if it belonged to the wall itself. I knocked once, softly. The breathing stopped instantly. No fading. No hesitation. Just gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound had. I waited, heart pounding, listening for movement on the other side. A cough. A shift. Footsteps. Anything to confirm there was a person there. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. The breathing didn't return that night. Or the next. For several days, everything was normal. No sound. No strange silence. No sense of pressure in the room. I started to relax. I even laughed about it once, telling myself how easily the brain fills in gaps when you're tired and alone. Then I noticed something else. The wall behind my bed was warm. Not hot. Just slightly warmer than the other walls. Warm enough that I noticed it when my shoulder brushed against it while changing the sheets. I pressed my palm flat against it. The warmth felt localized, concentrated, like heat trapped behind it. I checked the other walls. Cold. Neutral. Only that one. That night, I moved my bed a few inches away from the wall. Just enough to feel better about it. Just enough to convince myself I was being rational. The breathing came back at 3:11 a.m. Louder this time. Not louder in volume, but closer. More present. I could feel it in my chest, a faint vibration in the air. I stayed still, staring at the ceiling, afraid that any movement would acknowledge it somehow. And then I realized something that made my stomach drop. The breathing was no longer coming from a single point. It wasn't just behind the wall. It was stretched along it, as if something was pressed flat against the entire surface, breathing through it, slowly, patiently, waiting. I didn't move. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to that slow, distributed breathing, but at some point fear stopped being sharp and became dull, heavy, practical. My mind began doing what it always does when panic burns out. It started looking for explanations. Ventilation, air pockets, pressure differences, anything. I got out of bed just before dawn and stood barefoot on the floor facing the wall. Up close, I could feel it more than hear it. A faint pressure, almost like standing near a large animal that's asleep. The wall wasn't vibrating, not exactly. It just felt occupied. I went to work on no sleep and told no one. It didn't feel like something you could explain out loud without sounding unstable. During the day, the apartment felt normal again. The wall was cool, silent, empty. I almost convinced myself the nights were a stress response. My body misfiring. My brain inventing patterns. That evening, I bought a cheap carbon monoxide detector. I didn't really think that was the cause, but it was something concrete I could do. Something responsible. I placed it near the bedroom wall and went to bed with the lights on. The breathing returned at 3:10. The detector stayed silent. I sat up and listened, heart steady now, not racing. There was something methodical about it that made panic feel pointless. I reached out and placed my palm flat against the wall again. It was warmer than before. Not by much. Just enough. I left my hand there longer this time. As the minutes passed, I noticed a strange sensation. Not heat, not movement, but resistance. Like pressing against a surface that wasn't completely solid. Like the wall was thinner than it should have been. I pulled my hand away and went to the kitchen. I stood there for a long time, drinking water, grounding myself. I checked the building plans online, found a rough layout. According to them, there was nothing on the other side of that wall. No apartment. No storage. Just a narrow service gap between units. Too small for anyone to use. That should have reassured me. It didn't. The next morning, I called the building manager and asked about the wall. I tried to sound casual. Asked if there had ever been leaks, mold, structural work. He said no. Said everything was up to code. Said the building had passed inspection less than a year ago. I asked if anyone had ever complained about noise. There was a pause on the line. Short but noticeable. Not noise, he said. Temperature. That was all he offered. I didn't push. That night I didn't go to bed. I stayed awake, sitting in a chair facing the wall, lights on, phone charged, jacket on. If something happened, I wanted to be conscious for it. I wanted to see it clearly. At 2:58, the room began to feel smaller. That's the only way I can describe it. Not physically, not visibly. Just a subtle compression, like the air itself was settling. At 3:02, the breathing started. It was different now. Still slow, still careful, but no longer passive. There was intention in it. Pauses that felt measured. Like timing. I stood up and stepped closer to the wall. The sound followed. Not louder. Closer. I spoke quietly. Just one word. Hello. The breathing paused. Not stopped. paused. Then it resumed, slower than before. That was the moment something in me shifted. Fear didn't spike. It drained away. What replaced it wasn't calm, it was certainty. The kind you get when a question finally answers itself, even if you don't like the answer. This wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't random. It was responsive. I backed away and grabbed my bag. I didn't pack carefully. Just essentials. Phone. Wallet. Keys. I left the apartment before sunrise and didn't look back at the door when it closed. I stayed with a friend for a week. Slept on a couch. Slept badly but slept. No breathing. No warmth. No pressure. I felt foolish telling him why I needed the place, so I said there were issues with the apartment. That was true in a way. When I went back to collect the rest of my things, the apartment felt abandoned. Not empty, abandoned. Like it had been waiting and then given up. The wall was cold. Normal. Just concrete. I moved out that day. Months passed. Then years. I don't live alone anymore. I choose places with shared walls on purpose now. Thin walls. Noisy buildings. I sleep better when I can hear other people moving, living, breathing normally. Sometimes, late at night, when everything goes quiet, I become aware of my own breathing again. Too aware. And for a moment, I hesitate before inhaling, listening to make sure the sound that follows is mine. So far, it always has been. But I don't sleep with my bed against the wall anymore. And I never stay anywhere long enough for the silence to settle in. Because walls don't just separate spaces. Sometimes they create them. And sometimes something learns how to wait inside.